Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Terry's Talks. Today is a part one of cooking and contemplation. So we're doing it this Saturday and next Saturday. So just a reminder of that. And also, as always, there'll be a recording on YouTube, and I'll have that up probably late tonight. But Father Terry is doing cooking and contemplation, something that we both like to do. We both like to bake, and we both like to cook, and we love the contemplative life. So I'm looking forward to this. So Father Terry, I'll let you take it away.
Well, good morning to each and every one of you. It's 9 a.m. here in our mountains, and the background for the first part of our talk is going to be our bookstore gift shop that we have, because I'm going to start out by talking about a book that I just finished as we get prepared to enter into contemplation and cooking. This book is a book by, and we're going to have it in our bookstore. It's by a man named Philip Jenkins, Oxford University Press book, and it's called Climate, Catastrophe, and Faith. And it's a new book, and it's not a cheap book, I'll tell you that. But I have found it very fascinating. I'm trying to figure out when he actually put it out. I think it's a 2020 book, 2021. So it's this year's book. Now, what he talks about, he's both in science and religion, Philip Jenkins, Climate, Catastrophe, and Faith, is to try and summarize it. A lot of the way religion is expressed and what it finds important has to do with the climate. For instance, the Trappists, the Cistercians, if you will, the Cistercians with St. Benedict, not St. Benedict founded the Benedictines, but in 1098 or so, about 1098, Bernard and a whole bunch of relatives and friends went to this newly formed Cistercian place. And then he went on to found a lot of other monasteries that could have hundreds of monks in them. And this all happened between about 1050 and 1150. Now, what's interesting, and Jenkins brings this out, is between about 1050 and 1250, late 13th century, we had a warming trend in Europe, maybe around the world. I think it was around the world, but we'll focus on Europe for the moment. And what did this mean? Okay, it meant that there was going to be good crops because you had a longer season for warming, longer season for growing. You had good water. So the people were able to get nourished. So they produced more people. Remember, Bernard showed up with a lot of relatives and then a bunch of other friends. He had a big family. That's what they were getting then because they could feed them and the children could live. They didn't die from starvation and cold. And the second thing is the landowners were getting their rents from the workers. And so that made them richer. And where did they do with their money? They gave a lot of it over to the monasteries, which helps the monasteries to flourish. And also Bernard at the time wasn't a saint at that time. He was able to go out into land that before that hadn't been cultivated. It was sort of on the edge, but now with this warming trend, he could go into swamps and clear them and grow crops. And the monastery could flourish and feed a lot of monks, and there were a lot of monks because there were just a lot more people. And also that was the time of Francis of Assisi. He was in the early 1200s. And he's brother, sun, sister, moon, because the sun is our friend. Well, let me tell you today, it's not quite our friend the way it was. I was told by, I think somebody who has melanoma issues, maybe it's a dermatologist, the sun is not your friend, Terry. You got to watch out. But, and then we went in. So another thing that comes out of all this is you really have this emphasis, I would think, on the God of love. What happens when you have cold, miserable weather, the apocalypse? You get a lot of apocalyptic talk. And I suspect, now he couldn't go back with tree rings and all that sort of stuff. He didn't go back to the time of Jesus per se. But I noticed that Jesus was walking around a lot. I don't think he'd be walking around a lot if it was miserable weather. He was walking around a lot. I have no place to lay my head. Well, you can sleep outdoors if it's nice. But by the time you get to John's gospel, not John's gospel, John's, whoever wrote Book of Revelation, which they said was written quite late in the first century, years after Jesus died, it's apocalypse. And there was some of that apocalyptic talk. The end of the world is coming. And I bet you're going to start hearing that stuff now. So he goes into when you have revolutions, like the French Revolution, bad crops, cold trend. There was a big cold period from about, 1300s to maybe mid 1800s. What happened is we went into a natural warming trend in the late 19th century, 20th century. The problem is we exacerbated it with our industrial revolution. So a warming trend is natural. It's good for the earth, it's good for the land. You got to have it sometimes, but we've upped it too much, so to speak. Any case, and he goes through this, and you look at some event in history, some terrible event that happened in history, and they say, "Oh, how'd that happen?" When you had the 1917 Russian Revolution, they weren't having good crops. When you're having good crops and people have food and it's nice outside, you don't get too many revolutions, I guess, at least in Europe and those parts. So, and he goes into China and he looks at stuff goes on there, what we would call is Southeast Asia, India, and you get this sense that a lot of what's happening has to do with the weather. So Philip Jenkins, Climate, Catastrophe, and Faith is the book that I wanted to tell you about today. Now, let's get on to our talk. And a book that you might like for this talk, I think we have it in the store, is called No Recipe. We'll put that in the, Chris will put that in there. No Recipe. And it's got by a guy named Edward Brown. This, of course, he wrote the Tassajara bread book, by the way. But it's not just about bread, it's about cooking. And I found this to be quite fascinating. It's not as if he goes through recipes, he goes through some of the things I'll be talking about. So he, No Recipe, Edward S.B. Brown. And that is a Sounds True book. Sounds True is right out of Boulder, Colorado. So let's look at what's happening with cooking and contemplation. I only began to cook some when I started going on holidays with my sister. Not when I started going, I have a sister on the West Coast. We still do, or try to, go to a place called Sea Ranch for about a week every late October, early November, because it's around her birthday. We started this way back in 1988. And I never cooked. She did all the cooking. I did the dishes. She did all the cooking. And it was only gradually that I began to move into it. What was that all about? Well, it was about the way I grew up, not just me, the way I grew up. I find, for instance, now that I literally write sometimes with my mother's pen. It's a pink pen. It was the pen she used to write with way back when she died in 2003, and I've had this pen ever since. So there's something about my mother and cooking that is very close to me. Uh, when I was growing up in our house, I was clueless about cooking, but I wasn't just clueless, I was thoughtless. And since we're talking about contemplative prayer and spiritual growth, I think the thoughtlessness is something that has come to me because a lot of people can be clueless. That's the way you start out when you don't know anything about cooking. You're clueless, you don't know. It's maybe not a natural talent. It certainly wasn't for me. But what happened was I was also thoughtless about helping to cook. It 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 didn't really occur to me to help to cook, and if it did occur to me, I wouldn't offer what few times it would because I was afraid. And what's fear about? It's about your ego. What are you afraid of? You're afraid you'll mess up, and you don't like to mess up. You're afraid because you don't know how things are going to turn out. You don't know about the future. You don't understand the food, and you're afraid to learn. You're afraid to grow. Period. So that's why I never got involved in cooking, and I found out later it's not rocket science. But I was the kind of guy who was afraid and selfish. Let me tell you, silence and stillness kind of prayer is just what people like me need because you got to get in touch with that. And I was too selfish to be of service, which is what's supposed to come out of a more contemplative way of life. You don't just sit there navel gazing. You're not navel gazing at all. What you're doing is getting in touch with your deeper self, so then you find out that you're selfish and afraid, or whatever it is that gets in the way of you opening up to a wider, deeper life, which today is going to be about cooking. It doesn't have to be about cooking for you, but that's our topic today. I was preoccupied with me. And what I have to realize now, in other words, I wanted to get fed. What's for dinner? But it never would occur to me to be of any use for dinner. I could set a table. And I remember setting the table. What we used to do after we had dinner as a teenager, my sister Maureen would wash and I would dry. And as I was drying dishes, I would set the table for breakfast. That's my mother's very organized. You set the table for breakfast. We didn't eat like savages standing up. We ate sitting down at a breakfast table, and it was all set the night before by me. But I didn't have anything to do with the cooking. So I have to be careful now, jumping a little ahead, and now that I do cook for these monks or for anybody else, that I don't cook for praise, because that's just ego in another direction. That's just using cooking, but not changing your deeper self. I was afraid to cook because my ego is too fragile. Now I cook so that you'll praise me to pick up my ego. And if you don't praise me, I'll be upset, right? Because I'm not cooking to serve. It's still selfishness. And that's one of the things you're going to realize as you get into a deeper prayer life is as it begins to open you to new vistas, it opens you without you having to be completely changed. It takes away some of the, for instance, in cooking, it takes away some of the fear, but it won't take away all the ego. So I'm having to learn to cook because I want to be of service, not because I want the monks to praise me. What if they don't praise me? Well, my ego will be damaged. I'll get upset and I'll think to myself, they're worthless monks. And I'll walk around with a lot of resentments and I'll be completely unhappy and I cooked a meal. That's ridiculous. So you not only have, you want to be of service, but you want to be of service with a little bit of happy, joyous, and free, if you will. So my whole growing up was somewhat non-relational with food. I ate because I was hungry and I ate fast. and my dad ate faster. My dad was the fastest eater I ever saw. And I don't know what his experience was growing up. Um, I believe his dad died when he was 4. So he didn't have a dad around much. And for a few years, he just had his mom, my grandmother. And then he had a stepfather who was a nice enough guy. But, he lived in a cold water flat, kind of a railroad car. The only heat was in the kitchen, in the stove, in the oven. So maybe that's why he eat fast. I don't know, but he was a really fast eater. And then when he finished eating, he was ready to get up and go read the paper and have a cigarette. My mother, on the other hand, was a very slow eater. And I think my mother grew up in a chaotic situation too. When the Irish kids, when their parents died, often the Irish kid was taken care of by relatives, relatives of their mother and father. So my mother lost her dad before she even knew him. He died when she was that young, and her mother died when she was maybe about 10 years old, and she didn't see her mother much because her mother had TB and was often in the TB places trying to get well. And my mother grew up poor, and so she just spent a lot. She lived in orphanages sometimes, foundling homes, foster care. She had a rough early on. And then she lived with aunts and uncles, passed around. She grew up in New York, but she went to high school in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, because that's where the aunt was going to take care of her during school year, came back to New York City in the summer. So you would think, wow. So my mom, I suspect, really wanted to have what she didn't have, a sit-down dinner of good food. And she learned to cook. A lot of it she learned from my grandmother. My mother was willing to learn because she had a goal in mind, bringing people together. Well, that's a great service. So we all ate dinner together. But my dad, he still wanted to get up and get going. So he ate fast. I ate fast. He would stay, but you could tell he wanted to get rolling. So I was really non-relational with food. My mother ate slowly. She cooked and served with love. And I still keep that with me. Whenever I find myself grousing around the kitchen about why isn't this? Why isn't that? Why didn't they put this pot back? This is a stupid pot. Where's this? My mother just went about it. Now it helps that she also had control of pots and pans and food. So she knew what was around. In the monastery, I don't have control. I'll give you an example. I ordered a bunch of oranges. Now, we shop on Mondays, and I tend to cook late in the week. That's not a good thing if you only shop once a week. In any case, I shop, the shopper shops on Mondays. He buys, say, half a dozen oranges. I got plans for him. By Friday, there's one orange. The guys just ate him. There's an orange. I'll eat it. I should have put a sign on, don't touch these oranges, I'll cut your hand off. That wouldn't be nice, but it would be what I was thinking. Any case, I only had one orange. So you have to be kind of on top of it. But if you're cooking to be of service and with love, you say, okay, I only got one orange. What do I do with what I got? Which is, I think, an important part of growing in the spiritual life. What do you do with what I have? If you sit down to pray, and yesterday or this morning or whatever, it was really a good meditation. Wow, I just with it. You expect to have that. You expect all those ingredients to be there, but they may not be there this time. The ingredients are not the same from one day to the next in prayer or in cooking. So my mom cooked and served with love. That's my goal. And but I ate like a hungry savage. I was eating because I was hungry, not for relationship. I was not there to talk to my sisters or anybody. I just wanted to eat and get on to the next thing. And men can be that way. But I really wasn't present to the possibilities of what a good meal offers. A good meal eaten slowly offers an opportunity to get to know someone in a deeper fashion. For some reason, if people are eating slowly and enjoying the food, they're much more revelatory of things besides the weather and what they did today in school. They'll go a little bit deeper. Years later, when I finally began to grow up a little, I remember eating in Vero Beach, Florida, where my parents had moved. And again, my mother would cook. Now she's much older, so she's pretty tired. Did I care? No, I let her cook anyway. So I still self-centered guy, but I was ever so slowly from, practicing centering prayer. I was ever so slowly moving, just moving. So I would, everybody else would get up for one reason or another. I remember this meal very well. And I sat there. And I think it was a really, really special weekend meal. It might have even been a Thanksgiving meal. They all got up to go do this and that. And I sat. I was long since finished. I sat with my mother and we just chatted and talked and visited with one another as she ate slowly. And I think that, and she didn't say, Terry, don't you have something else to do or something like that. She was just fine. I think that was her goal. And finally, her only boy figured at least that much out. So I think that's why when people go out to restaurants, they, they, they engage one another. And whenever you go out to a restaurant and you want the service to be faster, I have to ask myself, why are you there? It's supposed to be slow. And I think a good restaurant goes slowly on purpose so that you continue. The assumption is that you want to be with one another. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten together. And it's not always the reality, but it's the assumption. And it's the kind of assumption I like to make when I'm cooking for people is that they want to be with one another. And you can tell when they really just want to eat and get out, get to the next thing, that they really don't want to be with one another that much. It's not that important. So in the monastery, we tend to eat in silence. But you don't get up until the abbot rings the bell. So you have to stay there, whether you eat fast or slow. You got to be there. And often there's something read or right now we're listening to tape. So we listen to something on a loudspeaker that all of us hear. And on special feast days, we just have music. So I used to be not present to eating. My mind was next. Now, I think one of the things that you can learn from a contemplative practice is to be present to the present moment. And that may come to your eating and cooking, to be present to the present moment, to the now, not thinking of what is next, or am I going to have the meal ready on time? Well, hopefully you do. But if you start going to the future, you'd be filled with anxiety, then you get upset, and you're not enjoying yourself, and it becomes a big, big ego trip or whatever, a big fear trip. So my mother cooked to connect us as we ate. And I think I keep that in mind. Are we connecting with one another as we eat? We do a couple of meals a week. In the nice weather, it's kind of a picnicky thing outside when we have a chance to visit. And that's when I kind of cook to connect with the monks. And all monks come into the kitchen at some point. They come into the chapel and the kitchen. What are you cooking? What are you making? So on and so forth. So food is a way to be together. It can be an excuse to be together. And my prayer time is food to be together with my God. Not to get things from God, but to relate to God. So food is not to get my hunger taken care of, but to relate to one another. Yes, it's got a hunger issue, but it has a much deeper issue. And that deeper issue, I think, will come out as you develop an interior life. So contemplative prayer is like the cooking. It prepares us to be with others in bonding. And that's the way that I look at it. I don't contemplate when I'm cooking. But contemplative prayer is like cooking. It prepares us to be with one another in a bonding relationship. When I get up from my sitting, if I'm doing it on a regular basis, it naturally will lead into, even a selfish, self-centered, frightened guy like me, will lead into bonding and relating to another. My sister in California, we all this cooking, and the one who doesn't cook, who sits and watches football, that one has to do the pots and pans and the dishes. And sometimes if I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I'll try to use extra pots and pans and leave her a big mess. But that's because I'm bad. But, I'm trying not to do that. Really good cooks think about the mess they're making and try and clean up as they're going along. I'm trying to learn that, but that's, I think, the next stage. So when I'm in the kitchen, and the kitchen is given, it's a given. Now you may be in a home where you can control what your kitchen looks like. I know people who have revamped their entire kitchen. They want the cabinets in a certain place. They like to have a center counter. They like to have a counter with their oven and stove in the center of the kitchen, and so on and so forth. I don't get. I get a kitchen as it is, and it was built by whoever built it. It's a big kitchen. So one of the things I have to keep in mind is not only am I on my feet a lot, but you're moving around from one place to the other because it's a little bit of an institutional place. I mean, so when I'm present in the kitchen, I'm not meditating. But the hope is that the meditation helps me to be present in a certain way in the kitchen. You don't meditate, it slows you down. It makes you forget stuff. So when I walk into the kitchen, I try to, well, first of all, I ask God to help me to make a good meal. But, still, I was brought up Catholic in the 40s and 50s. I still got this God as a man. And my experience was the women knew how to cook. So I always turned to Mary. Just in case, Jesus, I don't know he ever cooked. Oh yeah, he did at the end. He said there's some fish on the grill, but by then he was raised up. I mean, he was more than human. But so I asked Mary and all my female saints that I prayed to, or any male saint that knows what they're doing, to help me to cook well. But the thing is to be present to the present moment. Here I am in this kitchen. If I start thinking, why does this kitchen look like that? Then I'm not present to this kitchen. If I come in and there's some dishes that haven't been done, that's this kitchen. If I'm going to get all upset about it, then we're off to a very bad start in terms of my own spiritual growth and being of service. Rather, what's the solution? And we have a dishwasher, turn it on. And eventually, when it warms up, you put the dishes in there. It's not the end of the world. And I try to go into the kitchen early enough so that I don't feel stressed or rushed, because there's always going to be things that are not, that take a little extra time. For instance, in a house as big as ours, with as many monks as we have, most of them don't cook for others. But they do the dishes. And invariably, someone decides where something should go. It's not where it's supposed to go, but they decide it's supposed to go somewhere. So you have to search around for certain things to try to figure out where they are. Fortunately, it's not that big a kitchen, and you generally can find it eventually. So you can't let that get in your way. Where is this cutting tool? Some monk put it where this monk put it. You don't know who did what when. But you open up some drawers. You just do the best you can. And what it does, here's what it does. When I find myself getting upset because I'm out of control, I'm not only out of control, I don't have control because I can't find things. I say, aha, Terry, something's the matter with you. That's an important thing to learn in the contemplative life. When you're acting a little bit upset or dysfunctional, it's not about the kitchen. It's about me. Something's the matter with me. Because another person could come in and can't find the cutting tool and say, oh, I can't find the cutting tool. It'll show up. Uh, and I look at that. What do you mean? We can't find that. I got to have that tool. So don't have too much coffee in the morning. If you're cooking, could make you crazy. Or I could already be crazy, and it brings out the craziness. So the contemplative prayer is to manage craziness and insanity. So you have to be relaxed. Things are going to happen, and you've got to allow them to come to you and do what you can with what is. Isn't that the way life is? After you get up from your centering prayer, your meditation, your Lectio, your lotus position, and you expect everything to be fine. Well, the world's not meditating, and that cutting tool isn't meditating. It's where it went. And so the meditation is supposed to help you to respond to the things you don't control in life and respond in a way that is loving, sane, and practical. So I have to have a body presence. That is my head and my heart. So my head can start running around and my heart gets beating fast because things are going to get messed up. Back to the ego. But one of the things I have found, though, to go a little bit deeper into this body presence is it helps to be a little bit in shape, I have found. Now, it's not that you can't cook if you're not in shape, but I have found, at least in our kitchen, it's not a wood floor, by the way. So, it's a pretty hard floor. And you're tired. You can be real tired after a couple of hours. So if you're going to cook, it helps, especially when you're cooking for this number of people. It helps if you have a certain fitness and you're not too tired. In other words, this is a big difference. If I go out and run a couple of miles in the morning, or you go to the gym and work on the elliptical, am I still going to have enough energy for cooking? That is, my body, my feet, and my back can take a bit out of you. And I have found so far that there's not a lot of time to just sit. But one of the things I do is I fill up a glass of cold water. And I have it cold because I want it to sit there some, but I want to sit where I notice it a lot because I need to keep drinking water. You have to stay hydrated when you're cooking because that's one of the things that really tires you out, especially up here at 8,000 feet. So I don't get to reorganize my kitchen. It is what it is. And it's functional enough. So I go in, I have to be still for a moment so that I can get a little focus. Where am I? You think, well, you're in the kitchen, aren't you? Where's my mind? Where's my heart? Am I out here resentful that I have to cook a meal? Or is my mind elsewhere? God, what a beautiful day. I wish I was out there taking a walk. What am I doing here? All this cooking. I'm not here. My head's not here. My heart's not here. And it's going to be a long, hard morning. And there's not going to be much love there. And so I'm not going to grow spiritually with that attitude. I wish I was any place but here. So I have to be still for a moment and focus, say, where am I? And if I'm not present here now, as Ram Dass would say, then I spend a little time getting present, okay? So it's not about letting go of thoughts. I'm not doing centering prayer here. So I'm not letting go of thoughts. I'm trying to be in touch at this moment with my thoughts. But it's more about coming into a stillness in the present moment. Did I not learn some of that in my contemplative practice? One can only hope. And so it's not a strange thing to just get into the present moment, be a little still. I try not to come into the kitchen at the last moment and throw things together. what I'll end up doing is throwing things around. It's a lot easier to do that, getting present to the present moment. When you have your little prayer spot that you go to, it's a certainty. It's the same spot. It's the same chair. No one takes your chair. Things are the same. And you like that. And it's a little bit easier. That's why we like to have sameness, such as that, in our prayer. But cooking doesn't have sameness all the time. It doesn't have sameness at all. Where do we get to talking about food? So what I'm trying to do is get into that same space without be here now with love in my heart and not resentment and anger, as I did in my prayer. So my prayer taught me how to do it for prayer. Now I have to try to do it here. So I think the prayer feeds. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm in the kitchen. I'm trying to be present now. Close my eyes, take a couple of breaths, see if I can get into the room. So now I have to be accepting of what is here in the kitchen. That's life without escape. That's what I have to realize. This is life without escape. I am the cook today. And sometimes I've said to some of the other cooks, I'm going to run away. I'm going to run away because I don't have what I want. Or I can't do it. I don't know how. Well, but hopefully I'm kidding. And they hope I'm kidding. And the monks hope I'm kidding. But that idea of running away. So this is life without escape. And how many times do we try to do things to escape life? Or how many times do we eat with others fast so we can get away from them because we don't want to be relational? We don't want to get into any depth. We're too wounded. So I'd be accepting of what is here in this kitchen when I enter it, including dirty dishes or whatever. And you just learn to do certain things early on because someone else didn't do their job, and then get on with it. Just don't sit around thinking, why don't people do their job? I mean, why do you want to go through life that way? People don't do their job sometimes. People are people. The contemplative, I look at Jesus and what he put up with. So my life's relatively easy compared to his. I could call it my cross, okay? Monks who don't do their job, that's my cross. Or I'm Paulist priest. I live in rectories with other priests, other men. I don't know if women are like this, but men tend to be messy, to say the least. So I'm not trying to escape. Fear is useless in cooking. It's useless, period. And most of the time, sometimes fear is good, but fear is useless in cooking. It just awakes my ego. And what does my ego want? It fears failure. I won't have enough time to cook because the skitcher doesn't write. Something's the matter. Ego doesn't want to fail. It wants control. Cooking's not about control. I find food manages me a lot of times. I don't manage food. I like to think I do, but a lot of times it'll tell me stuff. Terry, this isn't working. And we'll get into a little bit more of that. The ego looks to the future. How's this going to turn out? It's not going to be done on time. It's not going to be any good. It's not right. Oh, failure, failure, failure. Ego fears a lack of knowing. It wants to know. Information is quite valuable to a 5 on the Enneagram. 5s are often contemplatives, silence and stillness. They're introverts, and they like to know a lot of stuff. That's why they read a lot. They like it. A lot of information. Information's power. Well, when you're cooking, you're going to learn some new things quickly because you're going to say, here's the avocados. Ugh, this one is too hard. This one is rotten. What happened? I can't do this, blah, 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 blah. Food's going to tell you stuff. You're going to learn a lot about you. So that ego wants predictability. looking down the road. It's not here now. And it fears a lack of control. It fears not knowing. So when you get into cooking, you got to say, ego, you can't be in control. And I think the contemplative life is what helps you to deal with your egocentricities or your ego, your big ego, and as Thomas Keating might call, a bit of the unloading of the unconscious. Finding out a lot about yourself when you cook and then learning how to let it go, which is what I think the contemplative life does. Learning how to let go of, I don't know. I don't know doesn't mean I can't learn or I can't experiment or I can't try something. Cooking is an adventure. Look at it that way. Cooking is a real adventure. Now that can be kind of exciting. And when I first thought of cooking as an adventure, I said, "No, I don't like that kind. I don't want that kind of adventure. I'll go hiking if I want an adventure, because hiking doesn't involve my ego. I can stop when I want. I don't have to tell people I meant to do 10 miles and I did 3. Then they say, "Why are you lazy person?" No. See, but in cooking, you don't want adventure. I think it's lovely. It helps you to grow spiritually by saying, this is an adventure. Let's have fun and learn and be of service and love. That ain't going to happen unless you've got a contemplative life of some sort, I think, unless you have some deep prayer life. So this adventure requires some trust. It's going to be all right. Trust God. It's going to be all right. And have a little hope that it's going to be all right. You're going to try things. You try things with hope. Why would you try something? Say, I'm going to try this. It's going to be a complete failure, but I'll try it anyway. No one does that. So you're trying with hope. And the prayer is a prayer to give you hope in the day, a day in which you don't have control. You're not in charge, and so on and so forth. You learn to enter the day the same way you went to cooking, with a contemplative prayer early on in the morning. So I'm going to try things. And the food will tell me if it was a good idea. It really will. It said, this isn't a very good idea, Terry. Just yesterday. Well, here's a couple of ideas. Okay. We have, you can buy frozen French fries. Okay. We buy frozen French fries because they're easy. They look like French fries. And I put them in a pan. I put the pan in the oven at the directions, 450 for a half hour. They don't taste good. They taste terrible. And guys don't really want to eat them. I don't like them. I did it a couple of times. And then finally somebody said, oh, they're much better if you use a real potato. Ooh. So I take out a potato and I peel it. And then you soak it in water for about an hour, the peel. You cut them, in French fry style, looky. And you soak them in water for an hour or so, whatever, cold water. And then you drain that out and you let them sit for a bit while you're doing these things. Well, then you're supposed to cook it in hot oil. Well, we didn't have quite the oil that I wanted because we had run out. See, that was one of the things. I got a little upset because I needed more prayer. But we'll put that aside for now. But we didn't put aside the potatoes. So what I did is I poured this kind of oil, that kind of oil in 2 separate skillets. And then I turned up the heat. Well, one skillet just started smoking. And so what it was teaching me is that oil will smoke up your whole kitchen at that temperature. Whereas the other pan had a different oil and that was fine. So you learn stuff. You say, oh, okay. So hot for this oil is this temperature. Hot for this oil is this. See, you learn. It teaches you. Meanwhile, a monk comes in and says, have you got the exhaust fan on? I said, what exhaust? I don't know anything about exhaust fans. So he turns on a button and we open a window and they don't die. The food teaches you something. And the potatoes turned out to be quite good. Everybody liked them. So the food says, if you do it this way, this is what you're going to get, Terry. If you do it that way, this is what you're going to get. And you decide. You live and you learn. So for a while, I was making French fries from frozen French fries, and it was poop. And then I made it. It was like gold from a real potato. And it wasn't that hard. You got to learn how to peel a potato, which is another thing you learn. After several of them squirt out of your hand and roll around on the floor, I try the 3-second rule. Sometimes it's the 10-second rule. I wash it off. But these monks, they're old. They probably got good genes. They'll live. You're not. This is how food teaches you. Food is a teacher, not just about what it can give you, but it teaches you about yourself. When it doesn't turn out the way you want, it says, how is that affecting me? Instead, if I'm really together, I say, well, that didn't work. We'll try something else. As opposed to, oh man, I'm a total failure. Oh, I hate you because you didn't give me a compliment. Oh my God, I'm not going to cook again. That's ego. So let's have the adventure with hope and trust that if this doesn't work the way you thought, you'll figure it out. And the next time it'll be just fine. So the ego is really competitive. The ego says it has to be this way every time. Well, sometimes it's not going to turn out quite right. No one's getting poisoned. It just didn't turn out to have the taste that you thought it might have. But the ego wants to be the best or better, whatever. And you're not in competition with anybody. You're the only one in the kitchen, or you're in competition with some phantasm in your head. It might be a good thing, as a matter of fact. Part of trust is to trust yourself. Taste the food before you throw extra stuff in it. Or if you're thinking of throwing extra stuff, taste it first and say, how does this go? So I'm now using, I do fish a lot. Not a lot, I do it once a week. And so I do some things with fish. I'm starting to do some Vietnamese kind of sauces, Asian sauces, and mixing things together. Not first, you have a recipe. That's beginner stuff. It's a little bit of an adventure, and you do the recipe, and then after a while, you just begin to trust yourself. So a recipe is like teaching someone beginning meditation. Say, here's what you do, A, B, C, D. Contemplative prayer has 4 steps. And that's why I liked it. It was easy. I like easy recipes. But at some point, you just begin to experiment and try things. And I think you do that in prayer as well. You always can go back to the recipe. You can always go back to the 4 steps of centering prayer. But what you're trying to do is grow spiritually in prayer, not do the method better and better and better, so to speak, because it's you and God. You're a unique person. You're a unique cook. And this is unique food today from the groceries store. It's what it is. Nature doesn't always provide the best, or a supermarket doesn't always provide the best. So you work with what you got. That's part of the adventure, and you're not competitive. So the dominant culture is competition and comparison. And I'm the only cook in the kitchen. What am I doing with competition and comparison? This isn't as good as so-and-so's. What are you going to? So? Try stuff. So I do these various mixtures now that have no recipe that I know of. And then I see how it tastes when it's done. And so, this worked. Oh, this didn't work so well. That's part of the adventure. That's part of letting go and enjoying, learning new things. That's what you do when you grow spiritually. You learn new things. So the food is relational. It's the food itself is relational. I learn to relate to myself better. Food will show us the way through trial and error. Okay, it's not the end of the world. If you have a meditation today and it seems like, that was much, that was boring, and my mind was all scattered and so on. So what? It's another day. There'll be another day, and there'll be another day to cook. So why worry? I mean, you do the best you can with what you got. And I think that's every day. So sometimes it's not so much a wrong ingredient, but what you did with it. Uh, so it might be not the food; it might be something I did. So you're finding out you and the food are relating. Uh, each each food has a vocation, if you will, and so does each person. Each food has a vocation to produce something, but if it's a little bit not ripe or too ripe, it works against it. Just as if you've gotten not enough sleep or you're too tired or something like that, you're not going to produce quite the spiritual results. Uh, but if you keep at it and keep at it, you learn. So, uh, food, oops, food has a job, and it tries to do its job as best as it can. But it doesn't have control either. It doesn't know when it's going to come off the shelf. It did the best growing that it could do. And if it's in a can, that's it's been processed. We do some. We have lots of cans, and we do some things with cans. But if possible, we prefer to try the real thing in our cooking. I don't know whether it's a Roaring Fork Valley thing, a Boulder thing, or whatever, the California thing. Well, we like to use the real stuff. When I'm cooking with my sister, we go to Whole Foods grocery stores, and then there's a nearby grocery store in Walala, near where Sea Ranch, where we stay for our vacation. And we know certain things we're looking for. We know the kind of produce that we want. We know what it looks like. We get the feel for it, but that takes time. And I remember when I was shopping for food, it took a while to learn. Is this ripe? You know what you do when you're in a supermarket? You ask somebody. You ask somebody who's coming along, and they got a lot of produce in their basket, so they must know something. And you say, "Miss, could you tell me, is this ripe? I'm just learning." And they're always helping. People like to help if that kind of question. So um, we are at our best when we flavor life with love. Um, so we're trying to flavor people and places with aroma, with the love of the cooking. That's part of the flavor we bring to it. But it comes out of your personality, I think. You're just a better cook if you're in a better space, at least over a long period of time. That's my sense. So life is not a recipe, it's a discovery. And that's one of the things that cooking is teaching me. Life is not, I don't pray in the morning as a recipe. I don't pray in the morning to control my day. I did. Yeah, I prayed like a recipe. I sort of had the idea, if I do this, then my life will be this. Well, that's not, you don't have control. Another ego thing. Life's not a recipe. You don't know what's going to happen. Things are going to get presented to you. Uh, and but it can be a discovery if you're open. So my prayer is to help me to be open to the unexpected and to cook this way. Uh, Not looking for, so when I pray, I'm not looking to get the results that some saint got when they prayed. You're not on their path. You're on your path. You can read, you can be inspired by Teresa of Lisieux, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, but that doesn't mean that's your path. You may think it is, and then over a period of time, you find out, no, you're going in a little bit of a different direction. You're more a Bonaventure or St. Francis of Assisi or something like that. So prayer is not a recipe. It's a discovery of yourself, your shortcomings, your faults, and your beauty. And then your faults diminish, and the beauty in which God hath made you ripens. Oh, great word, ripens into cooking. And so you cook this way. You are open to try things. What you want to discover is what I like now. So you have to, that's another thing. When you're cooking, you say, well, last week I did this, and I got to try to get that same taste when I mix these things together. but your taste buds might be a little bit different today. You're not in the same place. You're moving along. Taste buds as well as every other part of you. So discover what I like now, and give yourself the opportunity, therefore, to be inspired. Oh, what will I add here now? Why are you even thinking of adding something? Is that an ego thing? I don't know. Over a period of time, you find out, well, no, let's see. I think this might go well. Well, maybe taste it first. Or this might go well. Oh, I wonder what this is. Somebody bought this. Well, let's see what this looks like. So you try things and you be surprised as, yeah, you'll make a couple of goofs maybe, but you'll also find out a lot of stuff. People say, what's in this? And sometimes, I mean, they mean it in a good way. What's in this? And it just tastes good. You know what gets me? When they say something tastes good and it sounds like a surprise. I picked this up. When certain people cook, they say it in a different way. I still get some of this from some of these. Oh, that tastes good. Like they expect it to taste like what? So people are funny. After a while, you just accept that's the way they are. So deep prayer is a discovery of your relationship to God, which is never the same from day to day, because God is dynamic and you've got a dynamism too. You're dynamic because you're made in God's image and likeness. And so that's got to be my relationship to food. It's a discovery of my relationship of me as I am now to the food as it presents itself. And I need to be present to that rather than to be present to how I want the food to be or how I wish I was or blah, blah, blah. And so on and so forth. And this isn't even going into if there's a leak in the faucet or the stove doesn't work today or something like that. I mean, that's not even going in that direction. So this is when I got to remind myself everything in the kitchen is functional. I have to remember that everything in the kitchen is functional. And thank God it is, that there's somebody around who keeps things in order in terms of leakage or electricity or gas, something like that. So we kind of keep all those things in mind. Now we've been going, oh my gosh, a long time. You got to take a break. So Marianne Lindahl has to scoot. I think she's a cook. No, maybe she's going to go cook something. We'll find out. Someday she cooks something for me. I think she's down in Boulder someplace. Any case, now here, we're going to take a break of about 10 minutes so that I can go turn on the oven for one thing. And when we come back, we'll do questions and answers. Well, we'll do questions. There may be no answers. And then I'll do a little bit more. And then we'll come back next week and do more on cooking and contemplation. Now, if you would like to support me so that I don't have to go to debtor's prison where I will be cooking for them, I can pay my bills. The way you do that is it's going to be in chat. You can send money to my Venmo account, Terry-Ryan-25. We'll put that in chat, or send it to the address here at the monastery. Send a check, and that'll help me pay my bills. Because the monks give me room and board, but they don't pay for anything else. My car, my clothes, books that I buy for myself, blah blah blah. Medical stuff. Oh. Any case, let's cut that. Okay, here it is. We'll call it 10:10. We're coming back at 10:10 on your computer. Take care. All right. I'm back 10:08. Maybe I'm back a little bit early. 10:08 my time, Mountain Time, 12:08 East Coast. All right. I'm going to, where is it? I'm going to put in something to everyone. No. Okay. I was going to try and put down the name of that book that I mentioned earlier. And the book is called No Recipe by Edward Brown. Subtitle, Cooking and Spiritual Practice. I think he was a bit of a Zen guy. He did some things for Tassajara in the San Francisco Bay Area, but he was other places as well. And he also talks about, things aren't always perfect everywhere. You know, one of the interesting things, now it's 10:10, this is just an aside. One of the interesting things is you can go to a spiritual center and what's out front looks really good, but what's in the back is problematic. And, you think because of what you see out front, that is how they are with you on the retreat, that everything is fine, all the other parts of their life, and it's not so. It's just an ongoing practice. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things now as you're maybe thinking up some questions. And two ways to do questions is to raise your hand, or just not raise your hand, just unmute. But let me say something here. And here's what I want to say. A couple of things. People bake for the monks, and local people anyway. And that's very good, especially if they bake cookies. But what I've noticed is, and I try to keep this in mind in cooking, don't cook it because you say it's what they should eat. It's good for them. I mean, yeah, I'm not talking about a little kid. It's not as if I'm saying, okay, just serve them frosted flakes or something like that. But I think you have to keep a little bit of balance. This is good for them. It may be good for them, but what if they're not eating it? Then what good is it for anybody? You know, we do it stuff like that. Eventually, it goes outside and the birds eat it. I'll give you bread. There's something in these mountains that says monks should eat whole grain, whole wheat bread. Those kinds of breads, we don't. By and large, the monks don't like those breads. A couple of monks say they're good, but those monks don't eat much bread. And we keep getting all this dark bread. I said, why don't people just give us white bread? Oh, white bread's so bad for you. It's so terrible. I bake white bread. You know why I bake white bread? And I bake good white bread. There's not a lot of processed food because nobody else makes it for us. So there's this idea as a cook. It's good for you. You ought to eat it. If they're not eating it, what good is it? So you got to come up with something like that. What you think they should eat is just your opinion. And they're not children. And for children, yeah, you got to say, eat your spinach. There were two things I wouldn't eat as a kid, liver and lima beans. My dad loved lima beans. So my mother, no, he loved both of them. And so my mother never made liver. And I thought I didn't like liver. It was just that I hadn't acquired a taste or gotten the right liver, cooked it a certain way, and so on and so forth. I like liver now, and I eat lima beans. I tend to eat what's put in front of me, except I don't eat dark bread, hardly ever. To me, it's maybe healthy, but it's boring to me. So you got to keep those things in mind when you're feeding other people with love. If they're bored by your healthy food, well, you got to think about that. Now, my mom, let me go back to my mom a bit, because I'm thinking about, what if you're a single woman or a single man? Are you worth a home cooked meal? Are you worth, well, I suppose you could order out, get something delivered that's home cooked or something. It's with COVID. But the thing I think of is, am I worth a good meal that I prepare myself? And if the answer is, well, you might get various answers, but you got to look beneath, which I think the contemplative practice tells you, whether you're a worthwhile person to yourself. My mother was not brought up, and she was brought up by people who felt it was their obligation to take care of the Irish relatives. That doesn't mean they loved her. Maybe they did, but it doesn't mean they had to love her. So in other words, you can be brought up and be given shelter and food and education, but it doesn't mean you're loved. Or maybe you're loved, but you didn't pick it up. You didn't get it, whatever. I think what the contemplative life does is it helps you to realize that you are a lovable person in spite of what culture and upbringing did to you. Or how you, not what they did to you, it's how you interpreted it, okay? What they did or how you interpreted it. So people grow up thinking they're not lovable, and so they really don't take very good care of themselves. I mean, an alcoholic by and large doesn't feel comfortable in their own skin. They hardly feel lovable. And so they're killing themselves with booze and drugs and so on and so forth. So a contemplative life teaches you the reality that you are a worthwhile person, and therefore you are worth a good meal. So if you ever live by yourself, you can say, am I worth it? And you are. I would suggest you are, however you get that good, healthy meal. I know my mom, when she moved to Florida with my dad, and he actually outlived her by 6 months, she said, I retire. I'm finished cooking. She did that for a little while. Then they found out that restaurants runs up a lot of bills. And plus, she's not doing what she does in a way of showing love. And so when I would go to visit, they would want to take me to restaurants. And of course, I would say yes, because my mother was getting older. But what I really wanted was my mother to cook for me and cook those good meals. I wasn't yet in the cooking mode, if you would. When I went to take care of my parents, I actually started to prepare some food. And my mother, of course, supervised, sitting down there, dying of cancer. She still sit there and, kind of make sure. But my dad, after my mom died, I really got into cooking for my dad. And I could tell he was surprised that it was any good. I think that it's just a very low threshold of hope that their son could do anything practical in the kitchen. And yeah, it was a little bit scary, but I was going to learn because I was taking care of my dad. And he's in a wheelchair and stuff. We're not going to run around to restaurants all the time. You are worth it. I think you have to keep that in mind when it comes to nobody else around to cook for. So are there, I see a chat. I see something. Let me see. Is this a question? No. Oh, I thought I saw a question. So anybody got any questions? Anything they want to ask?
Can I share something, Terry?
Of course.
Well, this is incredible for me. I don't like cooking. I've always had the attitude I can't cook and I'm not good at. I mean, everything you've been saying is going straight to my heart because Now I recently have a health issue about blood sugar. So I have to stop buying lean cuisine, instant dinner, and learn how to, I mean, it's so timely. So I just thank you so much, because I experimented last night
Hey,
with
I've
a
saved
meal.
one life already. I'm so happy.
And,
Yeah.
it wasn't great, but I already learned something about it, like roasting veggies. You have to put fewer in the pan so they can be crispier. And so just thank you so much. That I wasn't even going to watch it, because my first response was, oh, I don't like cooking. So really, it's just very meaningful and helpful. And thank you.
One of the things you learn in cooking for others is if it's healthy, but they don't eat it, don't keep shoveling it in their face. Say, what can I do with this? So take something as simple as string beans. Now, my impression of string beans is you throw them in a pot of boiling water for a couple of minutes tops, because you want them crisp. Okay, that's one thing. So now they're not soggy, they're better crisp. They taste fresher. What if they're still not being eaten that much? So what I did is I put them in that boiling pot for about a minute. Meanwhile, I'd have a skillet with onions and garlic, red onions and garlic, and some oil. I often use avocado oil. I've used peanut oil. Oh, I love peanut oil. And then I get that skillet up to, medium-ish heat, and I just drain the string beans and I put them in there and just saute them around for a while. They're the same string beans, but guys eat them now. Oh, wow, these are good. So you learn from what returns to the kitchen relatively uneaten that it's not working. And you try some things. You ask some questions. Hey, so I learn from, when you use a book, I bake bread. So I started out for quite a while using recipes. How much oil do I use? Oh, I put too much. I put 2 tablespoons instead of 1, or something like that. After a while, you just mess around and you see whether the bread's moving. Are they eating it or not eating it? And I have learned how to make good pumpernickel bread, good rye bread. And there's a couple of guys that like whole wheat bread. So now and again, I make whole wheat bread, and even the other guys will eat it. Some, and not, it doesn't jump off the shelf, but so you learn to doctor up whole wheat bread a little bit with this or that. Not a lot of something, but just so it tastes good. And I mean, basically, you could make bread with dough and water and salt and a little bit of oil, but I throw in some stuff, and then you see how it moves. And if it moves, it's okay. That seems to work. And I don't know why it worked, but it worked. So, anything else? Well, you may be able to think about this for next week. Next week, we will gather together at 9 o'clock Mountain Time. The book I recommended is this one. Oh, you can't see it because I've got this virtual background. You see, but that's all right. I mentioned it a number of times. I can get rid of my virtual background and choose none. And then I'm just back in my room, see, with my little hat rack. And I can show you this book. Now it comes up, no recipe. And the other one is by Philip Jenkins. Our bookstore has everything. We have a great bookstore. You people who are local ought to come up here and do some shopping, as well as when you're out grocery shopping, you stop here as well. Okay, so we'll see you all next week. And we thank Chris Lake for taking care of this technology. Chris is going to be on YouTube by what? Tomorrow morning, tonight?
Tonight. You'll be on tonight.
Yeah, so all you need to do is go on snowmassbookstore.com and it will show you the actual site on YouTube. You don't have to go find it on YouTube. We'll just hit that button and boom, there it is, the talk. Okay, and we're trying to make life easier for you. Take care and happy times in the kitchen. Love you all and thank you for being here. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.